Hi friends, in this video we're going to talk about OAuth 2.0 specification for centralized authorization and authentication of users and applications. So in an organization, there will be multiple web applications and web APIs, and information will flow between these web applications and web APIs for the system to work. Let's see an example here. When a user logs into the web application of the organization, the web application in the backend can access resources from multiple web APIs, and the web APIs can in turn access another web API. So the information will flow between multiple applications in an organization. And it's important to secure this communication between the applications. So to secure the communication between applications, you need to implement authorization in each application. And suppose if you want to authorize a user in these multiple web APIs and web applications, you have to store the information of each user identically in each application, which is not possible. So that is why OAuth 2.0 specifies the way to centralize authorization through a security token service, which is a central identity service which will issue tokens in exchange to authorizing users and applications. So what happens is that user will not get authorized at a web application. Instead, the web application will redirect the user to a security token service. User get authorized there and it will issue the token to the web application. So the web application will trust the token and authenticates the user and even uses the token for authorization in multiple web APIs. And those applications will validate the token and give access to their resources. So in a nutshell, what happens in OAuth 2.0 is that the identity service or the security token service will issue tokens in exchange to authorizing the users and applications. And here in this scenario, you can see that there is a single identity service and user is getting authenticated in multiple applications. So in this way, single sign-on is implementable using OAuth 2.0. In fact, in many applications, you can see buttons like login with Google, login with Facebook, etc. So behind the hood, they're actually following the OAuth 2.0 specification. So OAuth 2.0 is basically for delegating authorization to the identity service. But in many web applications, there is also a requirement for authenticating users. So there is another specification called OpenID Connect, which is a small layer on top of OAuth 2.0, using which applications can also authenticate users in addition to authorize users. So OpenID Connect is a small layer on OAuth 2.0 specification, which can help applications to authenticate users. Alright, before getting to know OAuth 2.0, you have to know the terminology of OAuth 2.0 specification. A person who is trying to log in or get authorized is called a user, and the application which is asking the identity server for tokens is called a client. That means in a website, if you try to say login with Google, the user will be redirected to the identity server and it will issue token in response to the client. And that token will be utilized by the client for access to the resources or authenticating the user. So the client in OAuth 2.0 is simply a program or a web application which actually asks identity server for tokens in exchange to authorization. Using the tokens issued by the identity server, the clients can request access to the resources of the resource server, and the resource server will actually validate the token and gives access to the resources. So the resources means APIs or identity information of the users. So this is the main terminology of OAuth 2.0. The user will use the client to get the token, and the client will get the token from identity server, and this token will be used by the clients to actually gain access to the resources. And the servers which are hosting these resources are called resource servers. I have told about OpenID Connect, right? So OpenID Connect specification is actually useful for authenticating the user. So when the client requests the identity server for authorization and authentication, it requests for an identity token. And that identity token will contain user's information and some more information like how and when the user is authenticated. And access token means the token which is received from the identity server in response to authorization. So for authentication, the clients request the identity token, and for authorization, the clients will request the access token. Alright, let's talk about OAuth 2.0 flows. In short, an OAuth 2.0 flow is like an algorithm. In the beginning, we talked about the interactions between multiple applications and APIs, right? So you can see there are multiple scenarios here. User can log in through a web application through a user interface. A web application can call a web API on behalf of the user, or two web APIs can talk to each other without the context of a user. So there are multiple authorization use cases here. So in order to address multiple authorization scenarios like machine-to-machine communication, backend web application authorization, single page SPA web application authorization, and authorization in input constrained devices, like for example in applications like YouTube in a TV where you are constrained by the inputs, it will ask you for a QR code and sign in a phone. It's one type of OAuth 2.0 authorization flow. So there are multiple authorization flows to support different scenarios of authorization. So these are some of the OAuth 2.0 flows. Authorization code flow. So this is one of the most used authorization, like the one you do in websites like login with Google. This is one more flow, authorization code flow with PKCE, proof key for code exchange. This is one more implicit flow with form post, hybrid flow, client credential flow. Client credential flow is useful for machine to machine communication where there is no user at all for interacting. So it's basically useful for these two web API to web API communication. Device authorization flow, and there's one more flow called resource owner password flow. This is a very old flow which is not recommended, but you have this option. So basically each flow is for supporting a different type of authorization flow. So till now we have just talked about the concept of OAuth 2.0, right? So how to implement this? So the main part of the OAuth 2.0 is the main identity server or the security token service, right? So how can you implement login with Google or some kind of OAuth 2.0 server? If you want to do it completely on bare metal in-house with open source software, there is an amazing software called Keycloak, and Keycloak is basically an OAuth 2.0 server where you can manage users, applications, their passwords, the login screen, everything. So it's basically an open source identity and access management server. So it's maintained by Red Hat and it's open source and it's great. And there are sites like Okta where you have the identity server in the cloud. You don't need to install an identity server. You can create an account in Okta and Okta will provide you the OAuth 2.0 server. So this is how you can create a OAuth 2.0 server by using open source softwares like Keycloak or by using cloud providers like Okta. Even multiple cloud providers like Google, Microsoft, Azure, they also provide the identity server service. All right, you can implement identity server this way. So how can you integrate identity server in your APIs and applications? So to protect the API using OAuth 2.0, you have to integrate a resource server, right? There are multiple libraries in many languages like ASP.NET Identity or Auth.lib in Python, where you can create resource servers to actually secure your resources using OAuth 2.0 flows. So that's it, guys. This is a short introduction on how OAuth 2.0 is used for delegated authentication. You can see I have created a blog post on introduction to OAuth 2.0. I have also given you the notes and diagrams so that you can read and understand it easily. I have also given the links to the references. And there is this website called auth0.com where the terminology of OAuth is very nicely explained. I highly recommend you to open this link and try to skim through the concept so that you can get better understanding and deeper understanding into OAuth 2.0 and the flows of OAuth 2.0. So please be sure to check out the link of this blog post in the description of this video. Please ask questions or post your valuable feedback in the comments section. Hope you like this video, guys. Thank you for watching. Peace.